Alex, set the stage for everybody, please. 6 days out. What is the environment, the whole environment, based on reporting, based on the spending, and based on the numbers?
Well, the environment is good for Democrats, I think, simply put. And it's good for Joe Biden. It is good for a handful of Senate Democratic candidates. Whether or not that will be good enough to take a majority, it looks like they might, but beyond that, a lot of questions remain. It also looks good on the House level, where a lot of the most competitive races of 2018, obviously a great year, a Democratic tsunami year on the House level. A lot of those most competitive races aren't even competitive right now. If you're talking about someone like Lizzie Pinnell Fletcher in Texas 7, where I grew up, or Katie Porter in Orange County, or any number, especially these old Clinton seats in 2018, they're no longer competitive. It's indicative, again, of a very broadly good environment for the party. And you see that reflected in the presidential race, not only in the polls, but where the candidates are visiting, right? I mean, Joe Biden's in a place like Georgia. He's going to visit Iowa. These are states that were not supposed to be part of the core battleground of 2020. And yet here in the last weeks of the campaign, the focus is as much in a place like Texas as it seems to be in a place like North Carolina. And this is bad news for the Republican Party. And this is bad news for Donald Trump. We can get into, I'm sure Republicans will say that this is the same thing that happened in 2016. This has been an ongoing discussion on the show. There's a lot of reason to think that even if, of course, Trump still has a chance of winning, that the hill is steeper than it was 4 years ago. But this is a climate that is, bottom line, that is good for Democrats, is improving. And I think there's a lot of optimism when I talk to Democratic strategists, especially down the ballot, that this year could be every bit as good for the party as 2018 and possibly even better.
Dave, is he right? Is Alex right?
Yes, of course. Alex is always right. I would say 6 days out that there's a better chance that this is a blowout than it is a close race. And, I've just come to that conclusion being on the ground in places like Georgia, where I was last week. Alex mentioned that. Biden was there. The schedule says a lot. I mean, Trump was in Nebraska last night, right? So I think, if you look at the 6 core states, though, where most of this election has been centered, the states that we have repeatedly going back and forth, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Florida, Arizona. If you want to get a little more nuanced on it, I think Biden is stronger in the first 3. I think he is very solid in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. The polling looks pretty good for them, and it's been stable for months and months and months. 5 to 6 to 7 to 8 point leads. And those 3 states, the 3 blue wall states, if he just wins those, he wins the presidency. Florida, North Carolina, and Arizona have seen some tightening. Republicans coming home. There's a story in the Miami Herald I read that, turnout is lagging a bit in Miami-Dade County for Democrats. So I think Florida is still a bit of a question mark. North Carolina poll yesterday showed it tied. These are Republican-leaning states. I think they're going to be a little tougher to flip. And, I could see Trump hanging on there by the skin of his teeth. But that's still not enough, right? He's got to flip the blue wall. He's got to keep the blue wall that he flipped last time. And Arizona, I think, is actually looking better for Democrats, although there's been some tightening as well. And that hasn't even gone into the other expansion states that Alex mentioned, the Iowa, the Ohio, the Georgia, the potentially Texas that could be in play. So that's how, we're on this weird seesaw where we could see a really, really close race where Biden is just winning back the blue wall, or we can see a race where he's winning back the 6 core plus more. And I think, right now, looking at if I just go on the environment, I think that is more likely right now.
Adam, yeah, please jump in.
I was going to say, I think what it ultimately comes down to is that Joe Biden, just at this stage in the race, has more paths to victory, more viable paths to victory than Donald Trump does right now. That doesn't mean Donald Trump doesn't have a path to victory. He certainly still does. I think we would all agree it's very narrow at this point and potentially even narrowing. Because, even the way he was able to win in 2016, really threading the needle in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, winning all three of those states very narrowly. And that is ultimately what amounted to his electoral college victory. So right now in 2020, I mean, all of these states that we're talking about, all of these battleground states, Trump is on defense, right? These are the states that Trump carried, and he absolutely, in most cases, needs to win again. Where Joe Biden, again, his most straightforward path would be taking back those three Rust Belt states, and he looks pretty good there. But even if he falters in one, still a possibility if Trump is able to sort of return to his, or at least come close to his 2016 levels with rural white working class voters, and maybe black voters don't quite turn out, young voters don't quite turn out at the rates that Democrats are expecting. He's going to have other fail-safe options, as Dave wrote from Arizona a couple weeks ago, or maybe even a state like Georgia all of a sudden coming back into play. So certainly you can't discount that. That Trump still has a path here. It's just that I would say at this stage, Biden just has more viable paths. And comparing to where we were in 2016, I think at this point, there were some signs in some of that the polls were starting to tighten a little bit. At this point, we were already after the James Comey letter. That certainly turned things. There were a lot more undecided voters at this point in the 2016 race that really kind of turned to Trump there towards the end. Third-party candidates played a much bigger role. They were siphoning off a lot more voters than we're seeing at this point in 2020. So I think that that's kind of the difference in where we are now compared to 4 years ago for those people who are saying, well, isn't this what we were saying, about where the race was 4 years ago?